Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. In 1965, 2 months after I graduated high school, I was drafted into the Marine Corps to fight in the Vietnam War. In 1969, I fulfilled my duty and left the Marine Corps, but after seeing so much horror during the war, I lost faith in God, and it was due to my break from faith that I became estranged from my parents. My NDE occurred when I crashed into a tree after falling asleep while driving home from work one evening. Because I wasn't wearing a seatbelt at the time, my body was propelled forward and through the windshield. So this is what it's like to die, I thought as my body began to shut down from the loss of blood. I could feel my breathing slow before falling unconscious. I then became aware of the uniform darkness of the void I found myself in, and in that realm of utter darkness, I could hear something scratching and clawing. As my sight adjusted to the darkness, I realized that I was not alone in the void, and it was at that moment that I began to identify the ghouls creatures that surrounded me. Those horrific cacodemons were mangled and deformed bipedal creatures whose rotting flesh appeared to be hanging off exposed bone. Their horrific and frightening appearance was augmented by the razor-sharp fangs that looked as though they could pick a body clean in a matter of seconds. Those fiends, upon noticing that I was among them, began to chase me. "Help me, God, please help me," I began to pray as I ran from the soggy-sounding footfalls of their pursuit. I repeated my litany over and over again until my words became a loud and desperate plea for God's help. "God, please save me, I need you," I shouted unabashedly, and as I shouted, I felt an immense force grab my hand and whisk me away at light speed from the clutches of those demonic entities. From the presence that grabbed my hand, I could feel the love in its succor and in the energy that it emanated. We traveled through the darkness and into the light, and it was in the light that I was able to see with clarity that the being who saved me was an angel of imposing stature. "Who are you?" I asked as I looked up at that being, who appeared to be at least 10 feet tall. "I am Barkier," I heard a booming voice reply. Instantly, I recognized who he was, as Barkier was the angel that my parents would describe to me in my youth as the angel in command of the guardian angels. "Where was I when you saved me? And where am I now?" I asked. "Indeed, you were in hell, but when you called to God for help, the Most High sent me to bring you to heaven," Barkier explained in his booming voice. As I looked intently at Barkier, I noticed that his attention was focused to his left, as if he were listening to someone or something. "The Most High wishes to see you. He has something he wants to show you," he said before taking my hand and whisking me away with him once again. Instantly, we arrived at the doorway of what appeared to be an enormous throne room. Suddenly the doors to the throne room opened, and at Barkier's behest, I entered the throne room to the sound of a choir of angels singing. The sound of their voices in concert was indescribably beautiful, and their song touched me to the very depths of my soul. The throne room itself was an immense hall of indescribable beauty and grandeur. Every surface seemed to radiate the white light, and the entire space was luminescent with that divine light. The design and architecture of that immense hallway, with its towering Romanesque or Greek-style columns, were reminiscent of the architecture of the ancient world, yet its beauty was in the ineffable ethereal ambience the grand hallway exuded. The atmosphere of the grand hall, as much as it was visible, could be felt deeply within one's soul, filling it with joy, ecstasy, awe, and a love and appreciation for God. From the throne radiated the brightest light, which only increased in intensity the closer I drew to it, and that effulgence of light became so unbearable to my gaze that I began to falter in my approach. "Avert your eyes, Richard, for your soul is not clean enough to receive my brilliance," I heard a voice say, and I knew immediately that he who was speaking was the voice of God, or the Most High. "Why did you save me, Lord?" I asked him. "Because you called upon me in your time of need," he replied. "I stopped believing in you many years ago, but you still saved me," I stated. "Even though you say that you stopped believing in me, it doesn't mean that you truly did," he explained. "I assume that since I am seeing you, I must have died. So what is to become of me now, Lord?" I asked. "Your reasoning is correct, Richard. You did indeed die," he replied. It was when I heard his words that my entire life was presented before my eyes in an experience that was very similar to the experience of watching a film. In that movie of sorts, I reviewed the events of my youth, but more importantly, the feelings and sentiments that surrounded each event, feelings and sentiments that I had long since forgotten. As a teenager, I thought of my family as a special group of crazy people in the way that my parents constantly had us retreating to a bunker, but what I had forgotten was how much fun my dad used to make it. I also relived some of the most horrifying and heartbreaking experiences of my life, specifically the moments of horror or heartbreak I experienced or was witness to during the Vietnam War. I experienced in the life review the hurt that I caused by killing those who were at the time trying to kill me, and I relived the hurt I felt when my friends were killed. I experienced firsthand the heartbreak my parents felt when I angrily declared to them my refusal to believe in a God who would allow such evil to occur in the world. I saw how my mother and father waited months for my return before finally giving up. I saw the burden that my mother bore in caring for my father after his heart attack and how that caused her to be ill as well. I can't take any more of this, I thought as I grieved the hurt my closed-hearted obstinance had caused. With my cup of sadness filled to the brim, I felt that I was possibly the most ungrateful son ever created and that perhaps I did indeed deserve hell. Look again, I heard a voice say as it chuckled. When I looked again, I saw how proud my parents were and how they kept me in their prayers even after I declared to them that I no longer believed in God. They prayed that one day my heart would be healed and that I would embrace God once again. It's too late now, I'm dead, and there isn't much that can be done to change that, I thought. You're wrong, Richard. Who is it that created the heavens and the earth? Who is it that created the birds of the air and the beasts of the ground? Who is it that created man? God asked. You did, Lord, I replied. Do you wish to return or do you wish to stay? He asked. If I return, will I be raptured when the rapture occurs? I asked. That will depend on how you conduct yourself between now and that time, God replied. Does that mean that the rapture will happen during my lifetime? I asked. Yes, indeed it does, he replied. Will you tell me when? It's not like anyone is going to believe me if I tell them anyway, I said. You will have those that believe your words, but also those that will not. You will be older than your father is now, plus 20 years when the rapture occurs. When you return, tell everyone or tell no one, as I leave that up to you, God replied. It was then that I suddenly awoke in my body to the sound of sirens. When I opened my eyes, I opened them to a paramedic performing CPR on my body. He's awake. Get a move on, we have to get this guy to the hospital now, the paramedic screamed. Don't worry, mister, everything will be fine. You gave us quite the scare. Luckily for you, someone saw you drive off the road, the paramedic said. During my recovery in the hospital, it was explained to me that I was in a car wreck, and the person driving behind me saw me drive off the road and collide with a tree. That person, out of the goodness of his heart, then walked 4 miles to call for an ambulance. The doctors told me that I was a living miracle, as the gash on my head caused me to lose almost 70% of my blood. There's no way you should have survived that amount of blood loss, they said in their astonishment. After a long recovery period in the hospital, I was finally released, but even though my injuries were mostly healed, I was still somewhat confused and disoriented. You will be your father's age plus 20 years would pop into my head every so often, yet even months after the accident, I had no recollection of having had an NDE. Then one morning, several months after the accident, I suddenly remembered my NDE and everything that happened during my out-of-body experience. I remembered the accident, my time in hell and being rescued by the angel Barkier, the throne room, and the life review. I remembered also being given a prophetic vision of when the rapture would happen. I have talked about this multiple times in online groups and other places, such as the NDEU's net, but people usually end up laughing at me. My dad was 71 in 1991. In 2018, I turned 71. Adding 20 years to that brings us to the year 2038, which means that I will be 91 years old when the rapture occurs. I would ask everyone to please heed these words. It is not too late to change and accept God.